masterclass in Scotch. Yet, this is no ordinary masterclass. We've had classes, of course, with flavor palettes, flavor wheels, and taste profiles. So today, the masterclass is about pairing food with Scotch. So as you all know, we've all gone to several other events with Scotch and other drinks. Today, that's our primary focus. But of course, we'll go through, of course, the taste profiles and other flavor palettes. But as usual, we live in the day and age of social media. And as we all know, it's very active today. So I invite everyone to be even more active, because today we will have special prizes for everyone. And believe me when I say, I wish I could join you guys, but I'm facilitating for everyone right now. So please enjoy for me, because the prizes are something I really like to have on my own. But I can see I have some friends here, so please win those prizes for me. And maybe we can share after the event. But we have prizes for the best photo, the most number of posts, and the most liked photo. So I won't keep you any longer. Just everyone please remember the hashtags, of course. Love Scotch. Of course, the hashtag is Love Scotch. Johnny Walker PH. And of course, Singleton PH. It is my absolute pleasure, of course, to introduce you to a great man, Diageo's General Manager of the Philippines, Sir Johnny.
Hello everyone and welcome friends of the media. My name is John Good. I am General Manager of Philippines, Johnny Walker. Very excited to be here. I love Scotch, and I'm not the only one. Scotch is the world's favourite whiskey, and Johnny Walker is the world's #1 Scotch. In the hands and on the lips of influencers of taste the world over, and Philippines is no exception. I'm sure you all agree, you see Johnny Walker in the market. We are #1, the #1 whiskey in the Philippines, Johnny Walker. And we have a very rich history in this country and a very, very exciting future. Scotch is timeless and classic and never goes out of style. Johnny Walker and Scotch has been the drink of kings, presidents, artists, celebrities, and influencers for centuries. And every drink of Scotch, every dram of Scotch that you drink is a celebration of artisanship and craftsmanship. Scotch is cool. However, whenever, wherever. Scotch is such a rich and vibrant culture right now. The diversity of Scotch is amazing. No other spirit can offer the range of taste, flavours, textures that Scotch can. Whether you're enjoying the smooth smokiness of Johnny Walker Black, or the richness of Johnny Walker Gold Label Reserve, or the balance and fruitiness of the Singleton Glenord, Scotch is vibrant. Scotch is fun. Whether you're drinking it neat, on the rocks, or even in a cocktail. Now I prefer to drink Johnny Walker Black on the rocks. The favourite way that I drink Johnny Walker Gold Label Reserve is neat with some dark chocolate on the side. You should try it, it's fantastic. And then with the Singleton of Glenord, I drink it with a touch of water. So, I ask you all to join the Love Scotch movement, to celebrate with your favourite Johnny Walker or the Singleton, a wee dram on World Whisky Day. And I propose a toast to Love Scotch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Good. And of course, everyone, as you mentioned earlier, the hashtags are Love Scotch, Johnny Walker PH, and of course the Singleton PH. I see everyone with their phones and cameras out, so please feel free to post. It will be an absolutely great experience. We have more in store for you. We'll tell you why later on. But as you all know, there are a number of ways to enjoy Scotch. And today we talk about how you can pair that with every flavor of food you could possibly think of. And of course, Scotch is a drink that's timeless, that is classic. And to tell you more about this, of course, we have a very special guest who flew in here from Scotland. He has been working in the industry for going on 17 years now. He is a true master in this art. Straight out of university, this is his first job, I believe. Diageo's master of whiskey and loves Scotch global brand ambassador, Ewan Gunn.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. It's an absolute pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you, talking about something which I truly adore. John's already told you what he loves about Scotch whisky, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I get passionate about when it comes to Scotch whisky. One of the first things I love about Scotch is how long it's been around for. Now, Scotch, as John said, has been cool since forever. We actually started making Scotch back in Scotland in the late 1400s. 1494 was our first record of distilling in Scotland. And it was actually the monks who were doing that distilling. So perhaps when you take a vow of silence, you find fun things to do with your time, I don't know. But they were making Scotch whisky in the monasteries back then. Over the centuries, the Scotch industry grew and expanded. And a lot of the time it was farmers using little bits of barley they had left over to make a little bit of Scotch for themselves and to share and sell to their neighbours. That then gradually started to grow and grow, and eventually became the industry that we know and love today. Back then you could only really find Scotch in Scotland. Nowadays you can find Scotch in about 200 markets in the world. I'm very fortunate. I get to travel around the world with my job, talking about something I love. I've been to 76 countries now. You guys are my 76th, by the way, which is awesome. And I've yet to go to any country in the world, not walk into a bar and see Johnny Walker behind that bar. That makes me hugely proud. Scotland, if you look at a map of the world, is just a tiny, small country. We have a population of 5 million people. There's probably more people in Manila, yeah? Quite a lot more, I think, yeah. So we're a small nation, but it gives us so much pride that the whiskey we make, Scotch whisky, is loved all over the world. That makes us so proud. The other thing I love about Scotch is the range and diversity of flavour that you find with Scotch. I don't think any other type of whiskey offers that huge variety of flavour within its category. There are some great American whiskies out there, some lovely Japanese whiskies, but I think only Scotch really gives you that breadth of experience and flavour. From light, delicate, sweet whiskies from the lowlands, all the way through to the most powerful, smoky, intense Scotch whiskies from the island of Islay, and everything in between. And that's just looking at single malts. When you then look at blended Scotches, you have all of these aromas and flavours being brought together in perfect harmony. That's what gets me excited. That's something I think is truly beautiful. So that's what I love talking about. I also love the fact that with Scotch whisky you've got something which is a very natural liquid. When we're making all those huge diverse ranges of flavours of Scotch, we're only using 3 basic ingredients. We're using water, we're using barley, and we're using yeast. That's essentially it. We're not allowed to add some weird artificial flavourings to tweak that flavour. Those changes in flavour come from how we distill it, how we ferment it, how we mature it. They're all factors in creating great flavour. So we're using those same basic ingredients. You go to any single malt distillery anywhere in Scotland, they're starting with the same basic ingredients. It's how they work those ingredients through their process that makes every single one of those single malts unique and wonderful. One of the things we can do is add smoke to the barley, and that's where things get really interesting. Some of the distilleries on Islay, Colilla, Lagavulin for example, have very powerful smoky styles of Scotch. I'm actually from here going straight to Lagavulin on Thursday for World Whisky Day, which is on the 21st of this month, on Saturday. So it's a flying visit, unfortunately. I do hope I come back, but I'm going straight there to celebrate its 200th birthday. And that's what people are passionate about. It's not just how cool Scotch is, but it's that style with all the substance behind it. Scotch whisky's been around for a long time. We're doing the same thing now as we did 200 years ago, 400 years ago. We're doing it at a larger scale. We've got a bit of technology now to help us, but essentially we're doing exactly the same thing. And that's something that you walk around any distillery in Scotland. Some of the single malts that we make, I mentioned a couple of the smokier ones. Today we're actually going to start you guys off by tasting slightly gentler, more mellow style. And we're actually going to start off with Singleton of Glenord. We're going to start with a 12-year-old. Now this one's really close to my heart. I actually live in Inverness, in the Highlands of Scotland. So Singleton of Glenord Distillery is about 15 kilometres from my house. So it's one I probably find myself visiting the most often. And it's a really beautiful distillery. They actually have their own maltings on site, they prepare the barley, they do a lot of the work on site before they even start distilling. And when they create this whiskey, Singleton of Glenord is for me a great place to begin with single malts. It's very approachable, it's mellow, it's smooth, it's rounded, beautifully balanced. For me it's a great, great single malt. And one that if you're in Scotland, do make a point of visiting. Now this is a great example, I think, of a Highland style of Scotch whisky. Some of you may know in Scotland we do have different Scotch producing regions. We have the Highlands in the north where I'm from. We have Speyside, so further east, which tends traditionally to produce a richer, more elegant, complex style of Scotch. You have the lowlands to the south, where they make traditionally a more delicate, sweeter style. To the south of that we have England. We don't talk about them, okay? Over on the west coast, we have Islay, which I mentioned already. Creates a beautiful, smoky, powerful style of Scotch whisky. And these are the traditional styles, but I would say those regional lines are becoming a little blurred. Some people in Islay are making unsmoked whisky. Some people in Speyside are making smoked. So we still recognise them as legal regions, but they're not as defining in terms of taste and flavour as they maybe once were. So do bear that in mind. If someone describes something as an Islay style, that's not as relevant now as it used to be. But you can still say a traditional Highland style. This for me is a great example of a traditional Highland style. Mellow, accessible, smooth, balanced. When we're maturing this Scotch whisky, we use a combination of casks to mature it. It's all from one distillery, it's a single malt, but we do use a combination of cask types. And in the industry, we tend to use predominantly ex-American oak, casks that would have probably held bourbon or Tennessee whiskey. And when we mature in those cask types, we get a lot of that vanilla, almond sweetness that you would expect from that type of wood. We also use ex-European oak, Spanish red oak, Burgess Robar. And this is a wood that gives a more rich, tannic, spicy, fruity flavour. So you can choose to mature in one of those types or the other. Or in the case of this whisky, we actually chose to mature in both types and bring them together. So this is a single malt, but there's actually lovely layers of craftsmanship and blending talent going into creating this single malt Scotch whisky. I think most of you have one in front of you now. So if you want to pick it up, so this is number 3 on your little sheet. Yeah, we're not going to start with the blend, we're going to start with single malts. So if you want to pick up number 3, this is Singleton of Glenord 12-year-old. Just by looking at the colour, you can actually make some assumptions about it. You can assume that this has got some of that European red oak influence. When you smell it, that's certainly going to come through. You get that richness, you get a little bit of fruity notes going on there, but there's also a sweetness, there's a toffee caramel sweetness. If you're very, very thorough, you can just pick up on a little wisp of smoke in the background. It's so subtle, you can barely detect it. Similarly, when you taste it, you can barely taste that smoke, but it gives a little hint of dryness just on the side of the palate. It's very, very subtle, but it's there, and it's to be enjoyed. So you pick up your scotch, give it a quick smell, see if you agree with what I've just said. Maybe you don't, that's okay. One thing I should say is that nosing and tasting of Scotch whisky, it's a very personal journey. Everyone's life experiences are unique to them. That's the beauty of being a human being, okay? If I say this reminds me of a confectionery from when I was a child, or my garden when I was growing up, that might be very pertinent to me, it might mean nothing to you. Everyone's experiences are different, and when you smell something, it beautifully always triggers memories. It doesn't just trigger, this smells like that, this reminds me of something. So when you're nosing and tasting Scotch, do that. Don't just think, what does this smell like? Think, what does this remind me of? And you'll find that's much more emotive, it's much more evocative as well. And it helps you to really frame that flavour much better. So when you're smelling this, don't think, what's the taste like, what's the smell like? Think, what's the memories that are sparked? Your sense of smell is one of your most powerful senses. and it's closely linked to memory. So use that sense of smell, use those memories to generate your own tasting notes, okay? Don't just write down what I tell you. Think about what is sparking in your memories and record that as the tasting notes. Give it a taste now. I think you've all had a little smell. Give it a taste. Cheers. This to me is a beautiful whiskey. Very approachable. It's got some sweetness, yeah, it's lovely, I think. Quite rich. The other thing to think about and consider is the texture. And we're going to talk about texture again when we look at the blended scotches. But the texture on this is lovely. It's a little bit creamy, it kind of clings to the palate. Now this distillery is making such great whiskey and it's becoming so popular. We've actually recently just finished almost doubling the capacity on this distillery. So it's actually, we've doubled it to produce more of this liquid because it's proving so popular. So thank you guys for enjoying it so much. It's great. Lastly, think about the aftertaste. That's something that a lot of people fail to consider. Do think about what lingers. Sometimes you'll find flavours become more prevalent. Other flavours will actually fade away quite quickly. A good whiskey will give you that whole journey from when you first pick it up and look at it to when you're getting those memories of flavour coming back and everything in between. And I think this does this very, very nicely. For me, I get a lovely little bit of that toffee caramel sweetness. It just remains, it kind of lingers beautifully and very, very slowly fades away. I think it's quite an enjoyable experience actually, tasting this one. Have a little sip of water, cleanse your palate. We're going to bring out the next whiskey. Okay. So the next whiskey we're going to look at is Singleton of Glenord's Signature. Let me tell you a little bit about that one while they're bringing it out. Singleton of Glenord's Signature is a whiskey which was created relatively recently. And it was created by one of our masters of whiskey. It's a lady called Maureen Robinson. Now Maureen I've known for many, many years. She's a wonderful lady. She's worked with our company for over 30 years, okay, as a blender. So think about that. Not many people these days will work in the same job, in the same role for 3 decades. That's really unusual. The reason she's done that, she loves what she does, and she's really good at it, okay? She's passionate about recreating flavors time upon time, but she's also hugely passionate about playing with flavor and developing new tastes. And when we asked her to create Singleton of Glenord's Signature, we said to her, free reign, you can use any casks you want from Singleton of Glenord. We want you to create an interesting whiskey with depth, with complexity, with great balance. So she actually decided to use quite a wide range of cask types to mature this Scotch whiskey from a range of ages. So you're looking at something with a lot of complexity going on here. She started with some fresh American bourbon barrels. So these have held bourbon once, and then this liquid. And that gives you a lot of that vanilla that I mentioned earlier. So it's pulling a lot of that vanilla, lactones, vanillins out of the wood, and adding some flavour and complexity to the whiskey. She also used refill casks from America. That has a similar effect in terms of flavour, but it's more subtle, it's gentler. So you're getting the same flavours being imparted, but they're mellower, they're more rounded. She also used what we call rejuvenated casks. Now that's maybe a term people aren't as familiar with. Have you guys heard of rejuvenated casks before? No? Okay, so this is something that we've done for a long time in the industry, but we've recently got very, very good and accurate at it. And to rejuvenate a cask is when you have a cask that's been used many, many times. It's going to give in all it can give to the Scotch. So at that point we have the choice to sell it on, chop it in half and use it as a fat pot perhaps, or we can rejuvenate it. And to rejuvenate it, we shave the interior, and then that exposes a new layer of oak to us, which we can re-char. So it gives it a new lease of life. But it doesn't just reset the clock to 0. It actually allows some nice spicy notes to come through into the Scotch whisky. So by using these rejuvenated casks, we get a beautiful spiciness coming through the liquid as well. So that's some of the casks she's using from the American oak side. But she's also using a range of casks from the European oak side. This is a very complex, but very approachable liquid. So from the European oak side, she's using fresh casks. It held sherry once, and then this liquid. That gives you a big boost of rich berry fruits. Almost you guys have had like Christmas cake, you know, that fruit cake? That's her signature right on the front. She was really proud of this liquid. really proud. It took her years to develop. So she actually signed in front of the bottle to say, I've made this, I'm very proud of it. So you guys hopefully should all have a glass of this in front of you now. I'd love you to pick up that glass and give it a quick smell. So you might notice the colour is fairly similar. The aroma is a little bit different though, I think. For me, I still get a lot of that beautiful fruitiness, but there's a little bit of spice, a touch of tannins, a little hint of oak. For me, I also get a little bit of nuttiness coming through. Like almonds and Brazil nuts, that kind of little subtle nuttiness coming through. Do you guys agree? Or are you thinking I'm crazy? Well, gotta be pretty responsible. Have a taste. And when you taste it, a lot of those aromas I described should come through as well. So give it a taste now. And when you taste it, it's quite good to move it around your mouth. Don't just swallow it straight back. Move it around, let it coat your palate. You've got taste buds all over your mouth. Let them all access the flavours, and then swallow it. See what you think. This one, again, you get a little bit more, I would say, of the dryness just to the side of the palate, but then that lovely caramel toffee sweetness comes through. So it actually kind of changes in the mouth. And again, I think that's testament to the complexity and depth of character with this liquid. What do you guys think? Do you like this one?
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. I think Maureen did herself very proud when she created this one. Okay, so that is one of our single malts, one of our best-selling single malts, which I absolutely adore. But we do so much more at Diageo than just single malt scotches. Ultimately, we're a blending company. We own 28 single malt distilleries. Okay, 28, by far more than any other company in the industry. And the reason we own them is for two reasons. One is to make great single malts, of course. But two is because we also own some of the best-selling blended scotches in the world. Johnny Walker being one of them. And to make a great blended Scotch whisky, you need a range of single malt Scotch whiskies and single grain whiskies. That's why we have so many single malt distilleries, because it gives us that huge diversity of flavour that I mentioned earlier. And a good blend will bring together all of those flavour points from all over Scotland. So it'll bring together some of the light, delicate notes from the lowlands, some of those richer, more elegant, fruity notes from Speyside, some of the quite interesting, quite unusual notes from the Highlands, and of course, the West Coast and Islay, those smokiness. A good blend will bring them all together in perfect harmony. The Johnny Walker, I think, is a very good blend and does that very, very well. The Walker story is something that, again, as an industry, we're very proud of. Johnny Walker, or John Walker, I should say, set up the Walker's business back in 1820. He was only 15 years old at the time. Think back, guys, what were you doing when you were 15 years old? Don't tell me that. Probably nothing as impressive as setting up a global Scotch brand. I certainly was not, okay? I know I wasn't doing that at 50. I was playing on a BMX probably. He set up a global Scotch whisky brand. He began very small, very humble beginnings. He started in a small grocery store. He actually started blending teas to create complex flavours he could replicate time and time again for consistency. And eventually started playing around with Scotch whiskies and blending them and making something that he could be very proud of. Proud enough to put his name on it, John Walker and Sons. He wasn't just making a great liquid, he was making a great liquid which was consistent time and time again. Back then, single malts would vary from one week to the next. Sometimes it'd be amazing, sometimes terrible. John Walker wanted to create something that consistently tasted the same and tasted great. And he created his blended scotches based on that ethos. The business grew. His sons took over and their grandsons took over. And it grew and grew. And as I mentioned earlier, you now find Johnny Walker in pretty much every country in the world. I'll be very disappointed the day I go to a country and don't find it. It hasn't happened yet. Okay? So the first one of these two expressions of Johnny Walker we're going to look at is Johnny Walker Black Label. And that is our 12-year-old blended Scotch whisky. And something I should clarify, a lot of people think that when they see a Scotch whisky with a number on the bottle, like 12 years old, a lot of people think that's the average age of the contents, or maybe everything in the bottle is 12 years old. That's not the case. Under Scottish law, If you're going to put an age on a bottle of Scotch, that is the age of the youngest ingredient in the mixture. Okay? So we're using many, many whiskies to make Johnnie Walker Black Label. The youngest one of them is 12 years old. And that's the rule that we have to abide by in Scotland. And that applies to single malts as it does grain whiskies. So similarly, Singleton 12-year-old, all from one distillery, yes? But there could be Singleton 13 or 14 in there as well. The youngest part is what you see on the label. Now when you're tasting Johnnie Walker is really a blend of Scotch that is highly admired across the industry. It's been described by some of the greatest whiskey writers in some beautiful terms over the years. One whiskey writer described it as the Everest of Scotch whiskies. Another described it as the Rolls Royce of blended Scotch. One of my favourites was a chap called Jim Murray. He described Johnnie Walker Black Label as Michelangelo's David of blended Scotch. Now these are pretty lofty accolades, I think. That's some pretty high praise from some of the most renowned critics in the world. So we're very, very proud of that. Whenever I speak to our master blender for Johnnie Walker, he talks about Black Label as being his base. This is his centre that he always goes to. When he's looking to develop new expressions, this is where he begins, with Black Label. Because he sees it as being at the epicentre, at the core of Johnnie Walker, and at the core of great blending. It's something he's very proud of. He's a lovely guy. His name is Jim Beveridge. And I kid you not, that is his real name, okay? Jim Beveridge. He's our master blender for Johnnie Walker. He's been doing it for, I think, 34, 35 years now. The guy's an absolute genius. He's a scientist, of course, but he's also, I think, an artist as well. The guy is amazing. So Johnnie Walker Black Label is something he is incredibly proud of. It is not a blend he created, but it's a blend that he is massively proud to replicate year upon year and maintain that beautiful flavour and consistency. So you guys should all have a glass of that in front of you by now. So you can pick up the Johnnie Walker Black Label. Give it a smell. And think about what I've talked about. Think about the diversity of flavour all coming together. I sometimes describe Johnnie Walker Black Label as Scotland in a glass. You have flavours from every corner of Scotland, every style, coming together and working in beautiful harmony. It's actually a very approachable Scotch. It's great on the rocks. I quite enjoy it with a little bit of ginger ale. There's no right or wrong way to enjoy your Scotch whiskies. Try it with some soda and lots of ice. Try it with some ginger ale. You might be surprised. It's a beautiful style of drink. We have, as I say, all four corners of Scotland working in perfect harmony to create something which I think is greater than some of its parts. If you think of single malts and blended Scotches, if you think of a violin concerto or a solo violinist versus a concerto or a symphony orchestra, one isn't better than the other. They're just different styles. So with a single malt, you're going to have one flavour from one specific place, and that's beautiful. It's great to do that. But to have all of these flavours coming together and working in harmony, I think is also a really beautiful thing. So give it a smell. You'll pick up on some of the things I mentioned. You'll definitely get that fruitiness, the richness. You should get that signature smoke. The Walker range is renowned for having that smoky element. I discovered today, actually, apparently Filipinos quite enjoy a little bit of smokiness to their food, yeah? So, yeah, it's awesome, I think. Very cool. So, I imagine you guys will quite enjoy this flavour. That lovely smokiness, it just shines through. It's one of the core flavours of Johnnie Walker. It's what we're known for. It's what we do and what we do well. Give it a taste. And when you taste it, it's beautiful. It's got richness, it's got a subtle intensity, it's got that beautiful smoke on the sides of the palate, and it's got a really lovely lingering aftertaste. This one does hang around for a little bit of time. I don't think that's a bad thing though, I think that's a beautiful thing. It's a reminder of what you just enjoyed. I would ask you to take a sip of water now, because the last whiskey we're going to look at is Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve. Okay? And this is something that we launched relatively recently, certainly in the past few years. And Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve is something which Jim Beveridge got very excited about creating. Because one thing that Jim loves to do is to it, a mellowness. And remember I mentioned texture before, you really want to consider the texture here. There's a beautiful, creamy, waxy, smooth texture to this. And the way they actually achieve this is by using one specific single malt at the heart of this blend. That's a single malt called Clynelish. It's made in the far north of Scotland and is renowned and respected massively by the blending community for what it adds to a blended Scotch. It's great on its own, but in a blend, it gives richness, it gives creaminess, it changes the mouthfeel, it changes the texture and dynamic of the liquid. So when you pick up your Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve and give it a smell, you're going to get that smoke, but there's a lovely mellow honey sweetness that just shines through beautifully, I think. Give it a taste. And when you taste this, do think about how it feels in the mouth, not just the flavour, but the texture. Think about how it coats the palate. It almost clings to the side of the mouth. It's got a lovely texture, very cloying, and that lingers for a long, long time. I think it's something that's truly beautiful. I think it's amazing that our blenders are not only able to make great smelling tasting scotches, but also whiskies which feel different in the mouth as well. That's true talent. And remember, they're doing all of this from 3 basic ingredients. That to me is something beautiful. That is one of the reasons why I absolutely love Scotch. Now ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you enjoyed tasting some of our single malts. Hopefully you enjoyed trying a couple of our blended Scotches. I'm sure some of you, hopefully most of you have tried Black Label before, but hopefully it was interesting to just kind of talk through a little bit of the story behind it. What we're going to do now is actually bring out some food pairings. We're actually going to pair each Scotch whisky with a different dish. And some of them the food is going to kind of match exactly the flavours that are going on. Some of them is going to complement it a little bit. We'll take you through the journey with us and hopefully you enjoy the pairings. I'm sure some of you might have a favourite. I'd love to have a chat with you afterwards and see which one that was. But if you give us a few minutes, we're going to get the food in front of you, and then myself and the chef in the restaurant are going to pop up and tell you a little bit about it. But for now, thank you very much for your attention. Cheers. Black Label. Our reasoning behind that was with the tuna you've got some quite nice and quite delicate flavours, but you've also got that little coastal element coming through, and with the salted egg as well, that little saltiness again harks to the coastal style. So you remember I mentioned with Johnnie Walker Black Label, you have the richness, which I think is going to counter that delicacy quite nicely, but you also have that smokiness from the West Coast whiskies. So I think that's going to work quite nicely with that little bit of coastal style going on with the tuna. So give it a try and enjoy it.
Right next to it, then we have the Kurobuta. It's Japanese breed pork, cooked for 36 hours, and on top of it we put Spanish adobo sauce, pickled carrots, and some. That's what it is.
Yeah, I tried adobo sauce last night for the first time ever, and I adored it. And I tried the Kurobuta, sorry. I tried that today for lunch and adored it as well. So the two coming together I think is just heaven. We chose to pair that with the Singleton of Glenard 12-year-old. And again the reasoning was that some of that rich fruitiness, the toffee sweetness that you got in the Singleton of Glenard 12-year-old would set really nicely with these meats.
Next we have the Racine Bun. So it's built buns with some entraña. So entraña is actually a secret, Argentinian secret cut. It's very tender, very juicy. And on top of it we have some seafood broth. And please enjoy.
So we chose to pair this one with the Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve. And our thinking here was not just about flavour, but again looking at texture. When you look at that creaminess of the foie gras, and you look at that sweet, honey, smooth texture of Johnnie Walker Gold, the two just work together really, really nicely. So when you're tasting this pairing, don't just think about the flavours, think about those textures interacting as well.
And finally, we have the poached pears. So we have poached pears in Tempranillo red wine. We have some chantilly, we have some gorgonzola cheese, and some crumbled walnut.
So for this final one, we decided to pair this with the Singleton of Glenard signature. The reason being, remember I called out that nuttiness that comes through the single kind of Glenor signature. So that kind of almond, hazelnut kind of nuttiness just goes really nicely with the blue cheese in this dish. So I hope you enjoy the pairings. We'll be floating around. If anyone has any questions, just grab us and fire away. It doesn't have to be about these whiskies, just questions in general about Scotch, life, the universe.
Tama pala kanina.
So ano nga?
You enjoy.
Yung singleton ito.
Oo.
Nagkalituhan.
Okay.